Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. My name is Vincent Vichit Vatican, freelance journalist and member of the programming committee here. We're here tonight to talk about a subject that is very close to many of us. We're talking about the reopening of Thailand and step closer, or okay. And as many of you know, Thailand has reopened its borders after a very long time of travel restrictions, and since the beginning of the pandemic last March. And there have been several attempts to bring tourists back through, many of you are familiar with the Phuket Sandbox and the Samui Plus initiatives that allowed people to come back without having to quarantine in a hotel room. And we can talk a little bit about that tonight and what we learned from those experiences. But as of November 1st, Thailand has opened its borders to 63 countries and territories and to fully vaccinated travelers from those places. And we're here to talk about what that means moving forward for the industry, for tourism in general, for Thailand in general. And we have an excellent panel tonight to do that and to explain a number of things to you. Just before that, though, a couple of housekeeping things. If you have any questions, please hold them for the end after the presentations and the speakers have spoken. We'll have plenty of time for Q&A. And so keep those in mind. And you can certainly, if you're in the room, there'll be a mic. If you're following us online, please feel free to post your questions to the Facebook page, and we have people monitoring the questions, and they will be shared with everybody. The other thing I wanted to say before we get too far ahead is that we do have upcoming events as well here at the FCCT, so please follow those. On the 10th, if I'm not mistaken, we're doing a panel on the COP26 and the environmental summit that's going on right now. And on the 16th of November, there'll actually be the second part of this subject, talking about tourism. I will be hosting a second panel about tourism around Southeast Asia and what different how countries are approaching that. And in particular, we'll have the Secretary of Tourism from the Philippines. We'll have a representative of the Singapore Tourism Board. We will also have the CEO of an airline many of you will be familiar with, but I will get to that. That announcement will be made by next Monday. Thank you. So, without further ado, I think the easiest thing will be for me to ask the panelists for tonight to introduce themselves. Could we start with, so as you can see, this is a hybrid event. We are, some of us in the club, which is nice to see the club this full and this busy. As you know, we've been subject to the same restrictions, the same closures as everybody else, and so this is one of the first events where we have a nice house in-house, and we have 2 speakers here, and we also have 3 speakers joining us online. So online, could I ask Kun Ekaset to introduce himself, please? Kun Ek.
Hi, Good evening, everyone. My name is Ekasit. I work at Kung Si Security. My job mainly follow and update on Thai consumer stock. Key name would be, as you know, CPO 7-Eleven and tourism stock like AOT, Money Group, and Centel. Yeah. So today I would speak about the outlook. ครับ
Thank you. Kun Isra, who's joining us from Wohin, could you introduce yourself, please?
สวัสดีครับ I'm Isra Sanapaneset from Tourism Authority of Thailand or TAT, working in the local office in Prachuap Khiri Khan office. Mainly is working for public relation and term of sort of for marketing. Domestic in the office here in Thailand. So nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Kun Krot, who's joining us from Shivasom and the Thai Spa Association, sorry. Please go ahead and introduce yourself. I don't think your mic is on.
Okay, สวัสดีครับได้ยินนะครับโอเคครับ Good evening FCCT members. My name is Prayut Chan-o-cha. I'm the president of the Thai Spa Association and the committee of Thai Chamber of Commerce. And also I'm representing head of Hua Yin Recharge Project. ขอบคุณครับ
Thank you. And then here in-house, Gilles, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, with pleasure. So my name is Gilles Crétalaz. I'm the Senior Vice President for Accor Group, taking care of 150 hotels across 5 countries, including Thailand, where we have a network of 100 hotels. So I'm glad to be here tonight. Thank you very much for your invitation.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. And then John, would you please?
Yes, hi folks. I'm John Brown, and I am the CEO of Agoda. Good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, we're going to get started with an overview of the situation and a few points that Kun Ekiset from Kung Si Bank, Kung Si Securities would like to share with us.
Hello ครับ Well, I would like to go to the first slide. Well, today, thank you so much for having me here to talk about tourism outlook on Kung Si perspective. Well, on the second slide, I would try to get through quickly on these 3 main points. First one would be how important is tourism sector to Thailand, and second would be our outlook on the tourism sector. As you can see clearly on the second point, I wrote to be keep optimistic on the recovery, despite being for the past 2 years without most of the tourists. And third, I will show you some success case on the reopening of some country that had opened to mid haul and long haul, and you see rapid recovery in tourist arrival. On the first point, I would like to go to the first slide. The first slide, the key point on this page, we try to say that, well, it's been a while since we have 40 million tourist arrival in 2019. 2 years later, we have almost this year we expect only like 200,000. What happened to Thailand is that not only tourism sector has been hit, but the whole private consumption has been hit as well. As you see in the second graph on the right side, private consumption in Thailand have plunged as low as 17% in 2Q last year. And since reopening sentiment in May last year into the 4Q last year, private consumption rebound to only negative 14-15%. That means that without tourist arrival, private consumption recovery in Thailand will be limited. And how much is that? If you look at the bottom left side, the graph show that up to 20% of Thailand private consumption is from non-resident. Yep. So for tourists that came in Thailand, expatriate, etc. They contribute as much as 20% of Thailand private consumption and around 12% of GDP. So without tourists, well, our numbers won't recover as much. And if you look at the second next page, page 5, in the more microeconomic view, if you look at corporate, is across not only hotel, as at the top left side, you see occupancy rate in Thailand plummeted to low single digit this year because, well, without domestic as well, we got locked down several times. And at the top right side, you see that related sectors such as retailing. I took the sales of convenience store CPO as a prime example because they got a lot of store in Bangkok and all the tourist town. As you can see, even reopening, the sales of 7-Eleven doesn't recover as much and fail as in the same pace with the domestic private consumption. At this sense, well, corporate got hit hard, and without reopening, our GDP or private consumption won't recover as much. And not only corporate side, if you look at employees, employment, in as an individual, you see top bottom left side, unemployment increased as much as double from 1% to almost 2%. And if you look at under unemployment, well, some people try to say that unemployment rate in Thailand is unrealistically low. If you look at well, if someone got laid off, they just go back to doing the farming. If you see the underemployment and unemployment rate at the bottom right side, you can see that it jumped as high as 10% when on the last year. So at this sense, well, we really need the tourism sector to recover to support the recovery of corporate and individual employment. And at that front, go to page 6. Well, I would start off with, well, we reopened for the first time for the past 2 years, 1st November. How are we doing? Well, as you can see that the flight in Thailand is well quite not comparable to China or India. If you look at the next page, page 7, you can see that this is the data from FlightAware. You can see that the number of flight. If you can see the right side, in this year the flight is still below 2020 level. That is supported only from domestic recovery. That's at a sense I still see that the first reopening still doesn't have much of the impact to tourist arrival in Thailand. And in the next slide, page 8, this to reaffirm that well, the Phuket sandbox, as you can see in the bottom of the graph, in 2021 sandbox doesn't do as much as in 2020 with domestic tourism recovery. So with November reopening, how are we doing at Phuket? Well, it's coming up. The trend is good, but it's still below 2020 level. That is only mainly from domestic tourism. So my point here is that, well, we try, but it takes two to tango, right? So we try to reopen, but if if they don't open to us, then the recovery will not be there.
I just wanted,
But
I just wanted to add that if you're talking about the sandbox figures being lower than you're talking about July, August, September of this year, and those figures being lower than 2020, it would also corresponded for people who aren't in Thailand. That was the period of time of where the restrictions on travel were the strictest on domestic travel, and there were no domestic flights allowed in the month of August. So that's one of the reasons that the numbers fell as well.
right. Okay, but well, I'm not here to do gloom and doom everything, but the the good thing about the graph I show is that everything is a past. We already been hit by this. Because it's already rock bottom, it cannot go any lower. The only part ahead is recovery. So the next slide will be my Kung Si opinion on recovery outlook. In slide 10, I would like to emphasize that we are the side of glass half full. We are optimistic, and I think that in 2021, the number will not be as high, but 2022, I believe it will be 14 million, and we could get back to normal year in 2024. ครับ in this sense, I would like to make a point on page 11 that there is sign of global pent-up demand all around the world. Let's start off with the top left chart with the domestic flight in China. Well, as you all know that China have been showing a good recovery since reopening last year, and it's still showing flight above 2019 level. And at the same time, if you see the up and coming contender in the past quarters will be Europe reopening. If you can see the top right side, domestic flight for some country, especially Italy, reach above 2019 level. And that front, it followed by full vaccination by Europeans and reopening of the borders. And lastly, just came in last October, last 2 weeks, bottom left side, when US try to lift the travel ban to Europe, there are spike in bookings from US to Europe flight. As you can see, the booking has spiked up sharply. So I think that my key point here is that if you reopen, people will come. There is definitely a demand, pent-up demand in this front. ครับ And a little touch on China. I think that the current outbreak in China could be contained. As you see, last time Nanjing got outbreak as well, and it took like 3 months that government can take it under control. So I think that China current outbreak will not have any impact on the recovery in the near future. And page 12, I would try to make a point on Chinese more detail because Thailand tourist arrival is from China like 27%. So my point here is that I think that China will open late 2022, mostly in the second half of 2022. Because I think that Chinese has been conservative on that front, even on the policy, zero tolerance, vaccination, and even try to use mRNA vaccine that only made in China as well. So that would push the body reopening in China back further than other anticipate in the Winter Olympic. But at the front, I think that if they did reopen, I believe the demand will be strong because if you see Hainan, duty-free sales, it jumped like 200% because Chinese love to buy luxury goods, and if they can buy it anywhere, they just buy it in the country. So the purchasing power by Chinese is still there. And on the survey, there is a dragon tail survey. In short, is that given the outbound trip, Thailand still come at the second place as preferred choice after Japan in the bottom right side. So I think that at this Chinese will come back in Thailand in the near future. And my last point for tonight will be the early sign of success case. Go to the page 14. I will bring up the case on the recovery in mid and long haul on Turkey front. Why Turkey? Well, if you see in the left graph, since Turkey tried to reopening up in the second quarter this year, you see pent-up quite spike in recovery just in just like 3 to 4 months. The number of tourist arrival in Turkey reached around 70% or 65% of 2019 level. That's and that's from most of the recovery came from European market and Russian. Uh, that's well, this trying to point that they are not only trying to travel in domestic market. If given the opportunity, I think that and of course safety, people will try to travel as they please if we reopen. And the next point will be page 15 on the long haul market, Maldives. Maldives has been a success case in the past like 9 months on the reopening for season sun destination. Uh, as of now, 3Q for Maldives tourist arrival have reached plus 1% to 2019 level. And the recovery has seen without Chinese tourists as well. It's mainly from Europeans and Indians. This point for not only Europeans for pent-up demand and also USA, India, and other countries as well. So my point here is that if given without restriction, I believe the demand is there. And the next two last slide I would like to point is at page 16 is that if you look at the flight in India and in China, if some people are quite afraid that the airline will bankrupt and there will be no one trying to get the tourists here, I would like to say that the airplane just fly to Thailand and we will have our tourists. ครับ And last page 17 will be that keep our optimistic outlook. Things can go back to normalcy in the near future ครับ That would be all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sure that a lot of people who have questions about I guess it's very optimistic outlook. I'm not sure that I'm sure that you've also heard other people saying things that are maybe less optimistic, and so I'll be interested in your questions later for him on that subject. Next, Kun Isara, could you tell us? So Kun Isara is the director of the TAT office in Wohin in Pachuap Kirikan. But I asked him to join us in part to explain exactly what happened on November 1st, what changed, and what the conditions. So the Thai, the current program is called Test and Go, where fully vaccinated tourists from certain countries can travel almost freely in Thailand. So could you start by telling us a little bit about the basics of what's happened this week, what changed this week?
Yes, Vincent. May I share my screen, please?
Yes, you may.
Please unlock the screen sharing from the host.
Can Julian, do we have the screen sharing on? Okay, here we go.
Still not. But anyway, disable participant screen sharing.
Okay. What I do have, if it's helpful, I have the document that TAT put out last week with the chart of the conditions for entering on, if you'd like to see that. Julian, could you open the other one? Oh, you go. No, sorry, you can share now. Go ahead. You sharing is on now.
Right. Just a moment, please. So, I am going. Yeah. Good. Basic. Thailand.
So while Kun Isara is looking for his file, I'll just say that there are currently 63 countries and territories that are eligible for the Test and Go program. And basically, are you...
Okay, I understand. I think it's not be able to share, but I wish I go on, right?
Okay, good. Please go ahead. Yes.
Yes, as you may know, the government, relaxation of the, oncoming visitor all around the world from 1st of November. There are 3 schemes for international traveler to Thailand, right? And let's say we start with the test and go. This is we are confirmed, This is welcome fully vaccinated foreign visitor, including returning Thais and foreign residents from the approved countries or territories to enter the kingdom by air with no quarantine requirement from the 1st of November. So if you recall from the news from TAT, we start with the 63 countries, as the Vincent mentioned. This is called the Test and Go scheme, right? Which is allow the international tourists from those who are, based in 63 countries from 1st of November to enter Thailand without quarantine. That means it is called Test and Go, exemption from quarantine, right? And the second we call living in the blue zone, 17 sandbox destination, right? It's a blue color. And the third type is called happy quarantine. That means it's not ready for vaccinate, It's not cover vaccinate. If they are entering Thailand, it's going to be some restriction of quarantine, depend on 10 days by air or 14 days by land. When now we're talking about the 63 countries come to Thailand from 1st of November. They're allowed to come with the regulation of the some requirement, right? For example, they need to have a fully vaccinated, to jab, and then after 14 days, it's possible to come to Thailand. Secondly, it's got to be a RT-PCR test within 72 hours, right? Within 3 days, with the hard copy or whatever proof for you already have a RT-PCR test, and then you need to prove that you need to be online for individual to the website of the Thailand Pass of the Foreign Ministry, right? Just key in, just to approve that you already have a booking of the accommodation. For the Test and Go, you need for 1 day, 1 night booking in advance through the hotels Cha Plus, or alternate quarantine, or OQ, or AHQ. That means you have to book through the application of the Ministry of Health is called COSTE, COSTE. Earlier it's called Chaba system, right? Right now you need to make a booking through this system, COSTE, COSTE, because the Thailand pass of the Foreign Ministry, they will be linked with the application of the COSTE for booking, for accommodation. Accommodation for one night payment for test and go. You need to plus with the, it's a package, package plus with the RT-PCR test for one test, right? And also 80K supplier, right? This is like from a promotion, including. Once everything ready, the most important things, once you submit to online file for Thailand Pass, it's called tp.consular.go.th. This is a government platform, right?
So could we say that the test and go scheme, obviously there's still conditions and you still have to provide a certain amount of documentation and you have to pre-book your first night, but it's a much simpler process than either quarantine, which is now called Happy Quarantine, or the Sandbox, where there were more, you were required to book for longer periods of time and provide more documentation, and there was no platform to put them together digitally. So this is a somewhat simpler and a somewhat easier system to use. Is that correct?
That's correct. The one thing that earlier there used to be COE, right? Certificate of Entry, but now the COE has come to the tp.consular.go.th, which is the same. This is another platform which is more convenient. It's less time for apply. It used to be like 7 days or 10 days before, right, to approve. But now it can come to from 1 to 7 days for approve. It can be 1 day, it can be 2 days, 3 days for approval, because depend on the vaccinated, the vaccine certificate. If you are the vaccinated digital one, it can be very easy for the official for inspect.
And do you have any information about? I know it's only the fourth day since the program started, but do you know how has the system been working the way it should? Have you heard anything about either from tourists or from the authorities at the airports, or from the consulates, or from TAT? Is the system working the way it's supposed to be working?
Well, it's starting working because right now, on the earlier day, like 1st of November, when the starting point, it got some crucial point to need to fix it, because like the system of Shabba to transfer to the cost system, right now they are working very well. And some of the entrepreneurs in the area of Hua Hin, they already have the list. The list of the name list of the hotel already share or transfer to the system of Thailand Pass. That means it's starting working, and I mean, of course, the government try to reduce the difficulty of the timing consumed to the less time and more relaxation. For example, a test and go, when you are from this country, right, 63 countries, you're allowed to come any provinces in Thailand, right? 77 through the major airport, which is approval, like Suvarnabhumi, Don Mueang, Krabi, Phang Nga, Phuket, Chiang Mai. in Utapao, Buriram, Udon Thani, just like etc. But timing consumed for quarantine. We used to have 14 days and come to 7 days, and now it's 1 day. It's one night, right? One night means you need to have a RT-PCR test at the hotel, right? To reduce the bottleneck at the airport. So the hotels need to have a contact with the hospital to do such a, for transportation from the airport to the hotels, right? And make a test of RT-PCR. You get into the room, you wait for 6 hours, and then when the result is negative, in the next day, the test and go negative, they're allowed to go anywhere in the Kingdom of Thailand. This is the benefit of this scheme.
Do you,
Yes.
do you know the figures on how many people have arrived and how many bookings there have been, or how many registrations on the Thailand Pass there have been so far? Do you know those figures?
As the overview, we need from, for example, most of the international travelers, of course, come to Suvarnabhumi Airport. It can be daily, the booking like 3,000 or 4,000 or many more, but they need for some time, like again, test and checking. And the first beginning is not going to be not many tourists yet, but you start in the mid, demanding is there. People will queue up and waiting for to join as the scheme of the test and go as well.
Do you know in your province, have there been any travelers yet who have come straight from Suvarnabhumi?
Since the 1st of November, it's a kind of a query and try to, some of the hotels already have a inquiry for this, but in another scheme, the sandbox, the blue zone, because traveler might need a longer stay, but test and go, it's some point, why Hua Hin is not allowed for test and go, because in Hua Hin, the regulation from the airport to the destination for test and go scheme, not more than 2 hours. This is something, but for Hua Hin can come to the second scheme, it's called Blue Zone. The distance can allow with a 5 hours from the airport to Hua Hin. This is possible. But the second one, Blue Zone, you need to have a 7 days stay in the city of Hua Hin.
Okay.
In specific, it's called Hua Hin, Tambon Hua Hin, and Tambon Nong Kea district. Right? This is called for second of Blue Zone. Right? 7 days need to be complied with. Again, this is a mandatory.
And this is also a new scheme, right? Since the beginning of this week.
Yes.
Do you have any travelers arrived in Hua Hin on Sandbox on Blue Zone?
They are query. They want to come as soon as possible, but they still query about some proposal.
Do you have any projections on when? I mean, one of the questions that people have raised is about having direct flights, whether they're charter flights or commercial flights to the airport of Hua Hin. Do you have any projections on when those figures might pick up a little bit?
Private sector, we're working on as from Hua Hin Recharge. It's called group of the called Phoenix Group. They are planned to have the regular flight and charter flight from short haul destination between 4 to 6 hours in ASEAN, from Singapore, from Hong Kong. They are planning to, but the airport itself need to have a, approval from the government as well. So in the meantime, they are working on and will be very soon as the, it's open for government approved from the airport of Hua Hin. Yep.
Great. Is there anything else you would like to say about Test and Go right now? Or actually, given that you've mentioned the plan to bring in people to Hua Hin, that's a very specific scheme and a very specific program for which Kun Krot is responsible. So that's called Hua Hin Recharge. And perhaps this is a perfect place for you to explain a little bit about what you've been doing in the recent weeks and recent months and what you expect in the coming weeks. Kun Krot, please. I think you're still on mute, though. Kun Krot, could you turn on your mic, please?
The outline for tonight, I will talking about Hua Hin Recharge, also the Hua Hin Recharge achievement, also the Hua Hin Recharge future plan. This is a three step that for talking tonight. Okay, about Hua Hin Recharge first. Hua Hin Recharge project was launched in April 2021 when the government envisioned the Phuket Sandbox scheme. Hua Hin is one of the Thailand key tourism destination and benefit from its close proximity to Bangkok. For this reason, the tourism business sector and local authority agree on our potential to follow Phuket in becoming a pilot area. With this in mind, the local healthcare sector would need our support in sourcing vaccines for the local population. Because if Hua Hin were to be announced as one of the pilot areas, its population require a vaccination rate of over 70%. Since then, collaboration between private enterprise, local government, and healthcare sector has been formed. The first step was the campaign focused on sourcing vaccination and disseminating accurate information, which we did to great success. Eventually, in May 2021, Hua Hin was mentioned by the Minister of Tourism and one of the pilot areas to welcome back international tourists without quarantine. Therefore, a lot of vaccines were allocated to the area. As today, 1st November 2021, 80% of the general population have received their first vaccine and 70% their second, which herd immunity now in place. This is the most important achievement of the project. You can see that Hua Hin is very active in preparation for the reopening. We are all united to do our part. From starting with healthcare providers sourcing vaccine, the project committee has met the Minister of Public Health and Minister of Tourism and Sport several times. And he has also come to personally visit the area. The witness our readiness, service, and tourism entrepreneurs have supported their employees to get the vaccine, training them for the new normal, and sticking to the hygiene standards. We have worked well together to get our place ready. So far, over 150 hotels, restaurants, stores, and transportation companies in the area have been certified by SHA Plus or SHA. So we can said that Hua Hin has been ready and happy to welcome international visitors once again. That's why today Hua Hin is one of the country pilot sandbox areas for this reopening. Tourists who are fully vaccinated but not in the exemption for quarantine, test and go, can also stay in the sandboxes by remaining with us for their first 7 days. There are many benefits from high hygiene precaution, and domestic tourists can travel to Hua Hin with confidence. Business resume, employment resume, and economy getting back to normal. From the point of view of the private sector regarding the reopening, we would like the government to lighten up or in fact lift the current restrictive rules in relation to alcohol. This is the part of international culture to have a glass of wine at the dinner to improve the appetite. These laws were also part of the negative feedback in the Phuket sandbox as well. Secondly, the recently launched Thailand Pass, which decided to make an entry process paperless and easier, seem to need some more update to fully support travelers visit to Thailand. A focus on those two issues would greatly improve our chance for success. For the future, after the country reopening, through achieving our objective with the Hua Hin recharge, we see this collaboration as being very powerful when we are united. We will continue to work as a group with wide-ranging purpose on safety precaution and on local tourism. We will look forward to drive Hua Hin tourism onto becoming a sustainable tourism development and to be a wellness hub of Thailand, aligned with the Thailand Live Up project. Hua Hin Recharge is the pioneer cooperation of healthcare, local authority, and the private sector against COVID-19. From the first sketches, we promote vaccine knowledge, source out vaccines, then cooperate with all those involved to meet hygiene standards. This fight has not ended, so we will continue. This pandemic has greatly affected tourism and travel behavior. People tend to look for travel experiences that provide safety, hygiene, rich nature, and sustainability, particularly Gen X and Gen Y, which are major markets who are ready to explore new quality products. These new requirements will also match Hua Hin, which has a slow pace of life as a selling point. In the past, Thailand was mainly driven by mass tourism, which means there were high rates of resource consumption against a lower level of revenue contribution. We expect this kind of situation should never be repeated once international tourism resumes. According to the Tourism Authority of Thailand, to maximize tourism revenue with a more limited head count, spending per head should increase by 66% from 49,700 baht per trip to 82,000 baht. This emphasizes we need to move forward on quality, not quantity. Hua Hin has potential to be Thailand wellness hub for the wellness facility and its Hua Hin airport, where can welcome private jets. The government should also capitalize on rising wellness economy globally during the pandemic, as the segment was unfazed by the pandemic, with double-digit growth in the past 5 years. Hua Hin is a renowned wellness retreat destination with a number of Scandinavian villages and villas for senior living that attract tourists from the UK and Germany period to the pandemic. When the province reopened in November, those familiar guests have already expressed an intention to visit the area again after waiting for almost 2 years. The tourism industry, which previously contributed 18 to 20% of GDP during the few years period through the pandemic. The point of faced a large challenge when the country reopened its border without quarantine from November with a new target. The government attempting previous from mass tourism by gaining 50% of 2019 revenue in 2022, but which 4 times fewer tourists compared with the 40 million arrivals recorded in 2019. The country might have some established products like medical and wellness tourism, which are regarded as one of the key pillars of quality tourism. But in my view, as the president of the Thai Spa Association, and having been in the wellness industry over 10 years, the country may need a lot of more efforts and has a long way to go before achieving this target. However, Hua Hin is one of the areas with the greatest potential. It's possible for us to turn to high-value, low-impact tourism by replacing the number of tourists, but still maintaining 50% of pre-COVID revenue. Even though this path will not be easy, this is the right direction for our natural resources that were only used in the past. Resources such as electricity, water, and waste management for each tourist could cost around 358 baht per day, regardless of how much they spend in the country. Sustainability and wellness development still needs collaboration from tourist entrepreneurs, and also importantly, support from government, as seen with a few countries where this kind of service is not developed just for foreigners, but should also benefit local residents and communities. We cannot take any step backwards, or else we might fall behind other countries that have started to ease travel restriction for international tourists. Thank you, Kap.
Thank you very much for that, Kun Krot. Lots of interesting points there. We're going to touch on a lot of them in the next part of our conversation. Things about higher revenue tourism and lower impact, more sustainable tourism, and the desirability or how reliant, maybe the other way around, how reliant the economy was before on mass tourism, and is that going to come back or not? So lots and lots of interesting subjects to address, but before that, let's talk a little bit about. Let's speak with two representatives of the industry. One from Accor, a large hotel group. One from Agoda, a large online travel agent. what's the last year and a half been like for you? You've had, and this is you know.
Maybe I'm sure that John will certainly agree with me that the past 18 months have been absolutely difficult for all of us. Very painful experience. I had the pleasure of working in Thailand for more than 20 years. We went through a lot of crises. We all know that. But this one was exceptionally long and difficult. We had to go through a lot of difficult decisions. Of course, having all our hotels or most of our hotels closed, it was really a heartbreaking experience. But at the end of the day, we tried to be strong together, support each other. We have been working on the recovery plan since the beginning of the crisis. Hopefully that this plan will be implemented very soon. So we managed to remain optimistic for sure, but it has been extremely difficult. Absolutely, yes.
John, you too. You've had to make some difficult decisions in the last year and a half.
No, it's really been one of the hardest times I've gone through professionally. I've been in Thailand for about 17 years. And even, first of all, having to let go of 25% of our staff was a really, really difficult moment, certainly my hardest professional day in my life. We somehow came through it all, and I say come through it because I don't think we're completely through it, but somehow we did manage to band together. We got a lot of stuff done. We've kept our corporate culture going. We've executed on all sorts of things, which I can go into later, but whether it's Thailand, ASQ, or the sandbox like you heard about, not only here, but also in a lot of other markets, for example, Hong Kong, the Philippines, India, soon to be Vietnam and Singapore. So we've been very, very busy and somehow got through it all, but it was a very, very tough year, as I think everybody here would understand.
So what does reopening mean for you now? What are you hoping for? What can you hope for right now?
I think from my point of view, I used a bad analogy for Thailand because I used a tsunami analogy, but I think it does work on two levels because, when the tsunami first begins, the water disappears. And people look out there and they say, well, what happened to the water? And maybe it's never going to come back. And then it will come back, and it's going to come back faster than you think, even if you understand what a tsunami is. And if you look into the West, what's happened in the US, the bookings have gone crazy. They've really gone off the roof, through the roof rather. Or if you look in Europe, same thing. Or nearby in India right now, the market has more tourism domestically than it's had ever. And that will come to this part of the world too. It's really going to be vaccine dependent though, I have to say. And I guess all I'll say in conclusion is that unfortunately a little bit, yes, I can sit closer to the mic. I certainly can. Thank you. I will do that. But what I would say is it really is vaccine dependent. And we are in a little bit of a predicament in Asia, especially a couple of months ago we were, because we were the first into COVID, i.e. COVID came to China first, it came to Thailand second. But we're going to be the last out because the vaccine programs, frankly, have gone pretty slow. That Thailand is at about 45% when the rest of the world was moving along quite well. Now, if you look today, I will say to the credit of a lot of the markets here, many markets are doing much better. Japan, Korea, China, Singapore, Malaysia, those are 5 there that currently have a higher vaccine rate than the EU overall, a higher vaccine rate than the US. So they've come from a position of being kind of far behind. They've actually caught up. And Thailand is getting a lot of vaccines out day by day. So I think they will catch up too. So what that means for me is I am incredibly optimistic. The vaccines will fall into place. All the programs you heard about here earlier are working. The restrictions are easing. So I'm optimistic.
So would you be as optimistic as Kun X projections that things will be pretty much back to normal by 2024? Is that would you want to put something that concrete
I would, yeah. I would say 2024, and that's what my boss, the CEO of Booking Holdings, he's been saying something similar. If anything, I think it could happen a little bit sooner. You could get lucky and have, let's say, a quarter near the end of 2022, which, if we're lucky, would match the corresponding quarter in 2019. That'd be a little bit lucky. And if you did get that luck, then you would have maybe even a 2023, where every quarter then matches 2019, and then we're back, as they say. But I think to be a little more conservative, I would probably say 2024, especially given the fact that, the recovery is fragile. We were having this same level of enthusiasm 6 months ago, and then along came the Delta variant, and that ruined everything. And it's anybody's guess, of course, whether there's going to be some epsilon variant or whatever you want to call it. But I will say that the leaders around the world, the industry, people like Gilles, we do feel certainly more optimism now than we ever have since the beginning of the pandemic.
Gilles, how is Accor preparing? What do you foresee? And do you share that optimism? And are you then consequentially investing in the same way?
Absolutely. What John just mentioned is exactly how we feel about the future, even if it's always hard to predict what will happen. 2024, I would say, is a realistic scenario, but as we know, we had some great plans in the future, and this has been jeopardized by a new outbreak or anything like that. So we have to be very cautious. I think the big lesson for us is we all understand that our business is not secure forever. We should not consider our business for granted in our career. We have seen a growth over the past 40 years in Thailand. Every year we had 10% more profit, more hotels. This was like would be our destiny in this country, and then we realized that everything could collapse. So I think we value very much business. The way we see the business in the future will be totally different the way we used to see it in the past. So it's much more valuable for us. So when we talk about reopening, of course, this week, and I think you made the right decision to organize this event this week, because Monday was certainly for us, hotel operator, OTAs, maybe the best day of the year. We have been waiting for that Monday for the past 18 months. So it's really giving us hope for the future. We are much more optimistic, and we are preparing, of course, reopening of some of our hotels. We are expecting actually Phuket, for instance, to be at 140% in December, above last year, December, in terms of occupancy. We can see the booking. I was talking with some hotels today. I went to one of our Ibis hotel in the center of Bangkok, and one of our reservation staff, she was telling me last night they had to go back home at midnight because they had so many booking requests, test and go. We talk about that. It's working. And I would like also to say that when we heard from the Prime Minister, I think it was in July, that his vision was to reopen Thailand in November, we were happy to hear that, but at the same time, we're a bit concerned that it might not be feasible. And we can see today that it's really happening. So some credit, of course, to the Prime Minister for taking such a brave decision. We should not forget that Thailand is the first country in this region reopening its borders to vaccinated customers. And I am in touch with other countries in Laos, for instance, in Cambodia, and in Vietnam. They are really following what Thailand is currently implementing. So it's great to be the leader. We see also what's happening in Bali, which is a direct competitor, friendly competitor with Phuket, for instance. They are not there yet. They are working on this. So it's good to be the first. It's certainly high risk, but this is the way to go if we want to support the economy of Thailand. We know that the tourism industry is representing 20% of the GDP of the country, if I'm not wrong, and 10% of the workforce of the country is from the travel industry. So opening the borders, it's a great news for everyone, not only for big corporation, but for the Thai people.
For everybody who's interested in this subject, please do come back on the 16th, because that's exactly what we'll be talking about. One of the questions we'll be talking about on that panel will be how Thailand, is Thailand's model a model to follow for the other countries in this region? What does it mean for select destinations that are reopening, like Bali, like Langkawi in Malaysia, or Kuching in Malaysia, Phuket in Vietnam? Is that generating interest for the whole region? Is it creating more demand, or is it just competition amongst these destinations? So that was a very good point. Can I ask where you both see initially, where is this interest going to come from in the short term, and then between now and the end of the year, Christmas, New Year, Chinese New Year, which are the next big holidays? Where is the demand going to come from? We talked about how the things are changing and the things are different now. Is long haul going to come back first? Is China going to come back? Are other segments going to come back first? What do you see?
What we see, first of all, we see most of the demand and most of the searches coming from Europe and the US, and some from North Asia. But just to put a sense on the numbers too, that when November 1st rolled around, the searches on Agoda for people to come to Thailand were up by 7x, that is, not 70%, 7x. So people do really want to come back here. And to pick up one thing that Jill said, I think that we are pursuing the right strategy, because at the beginning of COVID, essentially a country had two choices: lock it down and try to keep COVID out. But predicated on that strategy was this notion that somehow COVID would go away, that you could keep it out. So, for example, New Zealand tried that and they failed. China's still trying that, and I think they're going to fail. And the other alternative was, hey, let's open things up and let people come on in, because COVID's going to travel all around the world anyway, and you won't keep it out. And the Delta variant, I think, was the most recent lesson in that. People said, I'm going to keep the Delta variant out of my country, but it didn't happen. Everybody has the Delta variant. So I think given that that knowledge, what Thailand did very, very well, and it took a lot of planning, as Jill said, is that they said, let's open up the borders to people who have a negative test and a vaccine. And the one thing that the sandbox taught us is that the last numbers I saw were that there were, I think, 28,000 people came in on the sandbox. So that's not enough to make up for the 100,000 people a day that used to come to Thailand. Not even close, right? But
what it's a little closer to 40. A little over 40.
It's what?
It was a little over 40,000.
40,000 a day?
No, 40,000.
Oh, okay. Maybe I had a number a little bit on. That's fine.
No, it just.
But then the
numbers are insignificant.
So the number I saw was a little bit old. But so of that 28,000, how many people showed up who then tested positive for COVID? That answer is 88. Okay, so that percentage is a third of a percent, right? A third of a percent. Now, you ask the question, and by the way, when those people tested positive, they were in a hotel, they were under control, you could keep them where you needed to keep them. So now, if you ask the question, what if we opened up the borders the way they were before, and you had 100,000 people coming a day, more or less in the old days? Now you multiply that by your third of a percent, and that means you're gonna get 300 new COVID cases a day in Thailand if you totally open the borders. Well, I mean, not totally, you still have to have a negative test and of course, and a vaccine. Now you've already got 8,000 cases going around Bangkok or Thailand overall every day. And there's many, many people who are not tested. So the conclusion I make is that it's a no-brainer to open up the borders, because the problem is not getting COVID from overseas. The problem really is still COVID going around in your country. So as you said, it's a risky strategy. It had to be executed well, but honestly, I don't even think it comes with that much of a risk, not at least to public health. And it's going to have a huge impact on the economy. So I do think Thailand should be commended, like Jill said, that It's the way to go forward. And I think more countries will realize that's the only path forward, because trying to keep it out, it hasn't worked for anybody. Maybe China, but that's not going to stay the case in another 6 months.
That's a very good point, and that actually leads me to the point that I wanted to make next, which was, what, and I wouldn't, if we can bring back our panelists as well who are online, if anybody has a comment that they would like to make about this.
Maybe if I can add something.
I was just going to say one thing about that. What have we learned from Phuket Sandbox? And that's exactly one of the lessons we have learned, is that the risk is not, even though there's a lot of anxiety generated by people coming in from outside, that isn't really the source, statistically not the source of the spread of cases. The numbers are so small and so insignificant in Phuket and all of the cases that were registered were in very controlled situations, as you pointed out. So that is one lesson that we learned. Gilles, go ahead, if you wanted to add something.
No, it's interesting talking about the sandbox. Again, it was a very interesting initiative to open Phuket and Samui. We have faced, of course, a lot of challenges. It was extremely complicated. I went through the process myself. I think, John, you went also in Phuket via the sandbox, right? So we know what we are talking about as a guest, as a customer, but also as a hotel industry, I would say, expert, if I may say that. So great initiative. Unfortunately, the room night production was not necessary as per the initial plan, but I see it more like a first step. Give us some hope at that time, I must say. We have managed to operate few hotels. We have managed to minimize the loss for some owners, also to protect the jobs also for our employees. So it was a good idea. It was a good initiative. So it was the first step. But today we are on a different level. We are opening the country. And yes, we see the same trend as Agoda, the business coming from Europe very strongly. And also, what would be also the game changer is if those countries will also waive those restrictions on the return. Because, you can lift all your restriction in Thailand, but if still you have to go through a 2 weeks quarantine in Europe, in a small hotel somewhere, or maybe larger hotel, certainly it will not be a very pleasant experience. So it goes together. So that's why those countries having less restriction upon the return are definitely the key target in terms of marketing, because we know that the business is there for Thailand. And I'm not sure it's the right time to show this video that we have prepared with,
go ahead.
If you don't mind, because everybody's doing this. Agoda, I'm sure that you have a wonderful campaign to boost the business for Thailand or the hotel operator. But I think it's a nice short video for you to see the way we are communicating the reopening of Thailand to our potential customer.
Julian, go ahead.
This video will give some inspiration to our potential guests. I hope you have enjoyed it. It's all on our social media, social networks. So maybe you can even share it if you want with your friends in Europe or anywhere else around the world.
And
Yeah.
you'll also see that, I mean, obviously, as you said, yours is not the only one.
Yes,
TAT
exactly. Of course.
TAT put together a very striking video as
Beautiful, beautiful video, I must
Um,
say, and we have shared the video also on our social media. We are
And
sharing, yes.
So actually,
absolutely.
before we move on from this subject, I was just wondering if either Kun Krat or Kun Isara had anything else to say about lessons they've learned from watching the Phuket Sandbox and watching Thailand reopen more timidly. Does anything that happened in the last 3 or 4 months influence what you're doing now for your destination, for Wahin? Either of you? For example, Kun Krat mentioned alcohol, which was part of the culture and part of with alcohol bans in place, it's hard to convince at least some of the tourists to come back. So that's one example. Is there anything else you'd like to, something that you're working on in particular?
The lesson learned from Phuket Sandbox, would like to share in particular for number from 1st of July till end of October, around 4 months. Phuket receiving over 60,649 visitors from around the world, mostly from a long haul, USA and European. Of course, it's kind of a best practice. We learn from the island of the approach to be practice in the area. Whatever the SOP, standard operation procedure, what we got to do, what we got to cope with the sample of Phuket. But in fact, the number, as the gentleman said, the number of infection from international traveler is very low. From first jab, from international traveler only 0.3 only, but it's not infected from the international traveler. In the area of the Hua Hin of Prachuap Khiri Khan, we're starting quite some time, like 3 or 4 months or 5 months, backwards. We set up the committee from the provincial working on. We set up the team of for example, to working on with the vaccinate of the local people, as the area base of Prachuap or Hua Hin recharge. Secondly, of the commander, the system of the kind of the system of the controller, how to tracking or something. Once they arrive to Hua Hin or something. Also, the crisis management is very important. How to tackle, and the number of the current of the infection in the area. That's most important. And I think, and the other things, it's the voice of the local, the people of the, they are living in the area of the province. We need to listen to them. This is a kind of, we learn and we use the basis of the Phuket to adjust on the area of Hua Hin. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That last point is a very good point. I did an article, a couple of articles last year, about how locals in Phuket, for example, felt that they weren't very well informed and that they lacked information to allow to keep them keep the public safe and keep themselves safe as tourists came back. Kun Grot, could you say something? Was there anything else you'd wanted to add about what you learned from the Phuket sandbox experience, especially in terms of promoting a destination, for example?
First thing, I would say thank you so much for the people in Phuket and also the governor in Phuket province. We learned a lot from them, and we can say all experience we did in Hua Hin Richard is just for the copy from them. But anything from the 1st of November is another chapter. This is a new system for Thailand Pass system. And of course, anything from the first experience, we need to adapt or develop something. We have some problem, and also are waiting for the feedback from the tourists to coming to the Thailand with the new system. Before that, Kun Isara just said that we used that the COE system before, and also a lot of the problem from tourists and the complaint from them. And now we set up the new system. So I think that I have to waiting for the feedback from this new system. And also Hua Hin is one of the potential for the people who want to fly direct to Hua Hin, because that we have the airport, we have the own airport. So I just talking to the government to apply the Hua Hin airport to one of the primary airport for Thailand. But it's so many process that to do it after this. So I think the TAT also that to fully support for open the new airport in Hua Hin. This is my idea, right? Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask both John and Gilles, what's changed in the way you do business compared to 2 years ago? Are there profound changes in, has COVID forced you to do things different in a different way, or think about your business in a different way?
If I may answer, yes. Specifically on the health aspect, the concern from the guest about the level of cleanliness. We have been always good at this, as you can imagine.
Can I just add, just very quickly, because Kunkrad mentioned it a couple of times, for people who are not familiar with the system in Thailand, SHA and SHA plus, SHA means that you're certified and you've met hygiene and safety, health and safety standards, and SHA plus means you've met those standards and the vast majority of your staff is vaccinated.
Yeah. So actually, we have implemented from the very beginning of the pandemic our health and safety protocols. It's called All Safe. It's a very powerful, actually, label, and with a very strict implementation in all our hotels. But of course, with all the other certification from the government, of course, we will always prevail, because this is the regulation we are following. But I believe that even when the pandemic will be over, and hopefully it will be the case in the near future, our All Safe label will always remain. I think this is a big change in terms of mindset for our customer, is their concern about safetiness and the level of cleanliness in all the environment. And also, what also has came up is their interest in sustainable development. This is what they are looking for more than ever. So they are expecting to have more space for themselves. They want. We have also noticed that there's a huge demand for villas or large suites. So they want their space, they want their privacy, but at the same time, they want to know what the hotel is doing to support the local community, because they all know very well that the local community has suffered a lot during the pandemic. So it's a very interesting end goal. And we had a lot of prediction during the pandemic, which segments of our business will restart the first. And I can tell you clearly, it is today the economy and mid-scale hotels. We are doing very well, because we have noticed that the length of stay of our customer is longer than before. So it means that they are ready to spend less per night. But in terms of luxury, because as you know, we have few luxury brands, Sofitel, Raffles, Fairmont, for instance, MGallery. Those hotels, they have been doing very well with the domestic market during the pandemic, because a lot of people could not fly overseas. So they went for this extra luxury experience during the pandemic. So it's interesting to see. But I believe that the luxury segment will recover from the inbound point of view. So it's just a matter of time.
Inbound or domestic?
Domestic will always remain, but don't forget that the Thai people, they love traveling. Usually they travel at least 1 or 2 times overseas. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So we will not stop them flying. But from the inbound business, I think luxury will come as a second wave. This is the way we see our business.
John, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say that in terms of how we operate, I mean, literally everything changed overnight. And right before this panel, before I was talking to Vincent, I was on the phone with my chief operating officer, and we were literally going through lists of thousands of people. We have 2,000 people working in Central World, just 200 meters away from here. And we were going through saying, well, these hundreds and hundreds of people are all doing something totally different to what they would have been doing in a normal year. And the question was, well, should they keep building the ASQ products? Well, that's kind of gone out. The Sandbox product, Shaba products for all these countries, or should they go back to business as usual? And it's a really, really hard question, but I only realized when I saw literally lists of hundreds and hundreds of people who had been pulled off any normal operations onto something else, whether it's Hygiene Plus, like Gilles said, to make sure that people can travel safely and hygienically, or getting domestic rates because domestic tourism is the biggest thing now, or making sure the mobile apps are even better than before because 2/3 of the bookings suddenly became mobile bookings because most of the people were making them from home. So really, I think everything has changed. There's also a renewed push for sustainability, like Gilles said. So my only 2 things I would say to this were, one, that I think business travel might be permanently a little bit different. Like, I used to go back to the States literally from here 5 times a year for meetings, and that felt a little bit excessive. So I don't think we need to travel that much. There's no replacement for some face-to-face contact, but I think some of that amount of business travel will go away. Although, on the other hand, kind of counteracting that a little bit is the fact that most companies out there now are offering people the ability to work remotely for some period of time, even after the pandemic subsides. So I think what you will see is people taking fewer business trips, but then saying, well, heck, I'm on a business trip, I might as well take a couple of more weeks in whatever place I happen to go to so that I can work remotely. So you'll see those 2 things. And lastly, though, I would say, I would love to say, and one of the panelists mentioned this before, that people will come back and somehow travel more sustainably or more responsibly. But my guess, unfortunately, is that people tend to go back to their old ways pretty quickly, right? Everybody remembers 9/11, and for the year after for the month after 9/11, people said, "Oh, nobody's going to fly anymore." Like, travel's permanently changed. Well, how long did that last for, right? A year later, flights were going completely as normal with a couple of small changes around, having your footwear checked for knives, and maybe most notably locking the cabin door so you couldn't break into the cabin. Besides that, things went back to normal pretty quickly. So I would assume that we'll regress to the mean, but hopefully there will be a continued push to make sure that we can travel sustainably, because without that, places will not be as beautiful as they once were, for sure.
Great. I think we're going to open up the questions to the floor now. Sure. Would you like to go ahead?
Yes, I'd like to go ahead. Thank you very much. I'm in travel business as well. I've been around 20 years. My name's Aaron Frankel, Groovy Gear. And I have done the quarantine. And I have traveled to America, and I have traveled. And I think one of the things everyone, I'm not saying everyone's missing, but the big point is exactly what Mr. Brown brought up earlier, which was countries either chose to go zero COVID cases, or they tried to understand that it's becoming endemic. Even the president of Israel, which was the first country to hit 50% with one in February, has now said it looks like it's going to be endemic because no virus has gone around the world. And from what I see is the more government involvement, the more poverty that is generated. And that is very clear if you go to Jill's in Paris. They had a 20% drop in the GDP during World War II, and Q2 in 2020, they had a 45% drop, okay? Because after Obama, you bring out your apples, you can sell it again, but if the government says you can't leave your house, you can't leave your house. Now, getting back to all of you discussed the SHA and health standards, and I really think that is not the thing that's stopping tourists from coming. I think what's stopping tourists from coming is the obvious stuff. It went from 14 days down to 1 day. But up until then, you still have 8 requirements for the COE. And I did it myself, and I got it 1 day before. You need to have a computer, a laptop. You can't do it by your phone. You need to have a printer on hand. And I had to call the embassy twice in Los Angeles myself because there were some mistakes working and whatever, and it was my old visa. So it's not an easy process by any means, and I don't think we should make light of it. The only way tourism will return, in my opinion, is the complete elimination of the barriers to entry. Right now, with 3 kids, my 2 kids and myself, even one night is a minimum of 3 tests, which are in America cost around $100 each. Actually, I paid $175 in San Francisco, so that's about $600. Here's another $600. So we're looking at 18,000 baht just for the first day of my arrival.
So, Aaron, is there a question in here, though?
Yes, the question is this. Why isn't the industry pushing for the complete elimination? If you have the evidence at 0.3 worldwide, it's less than 0.5% of the affected world has died, and 3 countries make up 60% of all the deaths, right? America, Brazil, whatever. Why aren't the industry pushing for the complete elimination? The WHO in February 2020, you can look it up, said there should be no travel or trade restrictions. It's still on their website, it's still their policy, and it's why Trump chose not to pay them because they didn't agree with him.
I guess just in summary, I would say that I think people, most certainly Agoda is, and I know a lot of my colleagues are in other industries, we are most certainly pushing for that. I think it would have been a little bit irresponsible to do that 6 months ago before people really understood how things were going to play out. But as Gilles mentioned, Thailand is doing a pretty good job being the first, at least in this region, saying, let's do it. And like you, I was in ASQ in the beginning of January, the full-on deal where I'll never know how close I was to killing myself, but I kind of felt kind of close on a couple
14
days.
I did it, yeah.
And then I was in the Sandbox most recently, and the Sandbox was a piece of cake compared to that. If we end up with the situation now where you've got 1 night in a hotel or test and go where it's not even 1 night in a hotel, but even if it were 1 night, that's not particularly onerous. A lot of people come to Thailand from overseas and need a day just to sleep off their jet lag or what have you. So, but the 8 pieces of paperwork, I get that as well.
It's still there. That's what I'm saying. The touch and go.
I get that. But all I'm trying to say is that if you look at the way bookings have gone on Agoda, they were minuscule when there was ASQ. They jumped up a lot when there was a Sandbox, and you saw the slide a little while ago. And they've gone up, as I said before, 7x when there's only 1 day. And I think once people get comfortable with 1 day, just to make sure that they don't somehow get COVID on the plane or what have you, I think you will go pretty quickly to nothing whatsoever. It's a scary leap, but I think we will get there because I agree. That's what you need to go back to regular travel.
Yeah, 180 countries were COVID positive, I think, within 60 days of February 2020. So clearly there was no way to stop it, and it is endemic. Okay,
agreed.
thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Thank you.
One more thing is just to complete the answer from John is also related to the level of vaccination. Okay, today we feel much more confident about the future, but a few months ago we are not at the same level. And also there's always a potential risk to see another outbreak. And this is the last thing we want. I think we have to go step by step, but we have always to think about the guest journey. Just make sure that all the platform developed by the government works perfectly well. We know that we have some issues at the beginning, but they are improving for sure. Make the process smooth and pleasant. On Monday morning, we had some picture from the airport. We had some staff welcoming some of the guests in a PPA outfit. I'm sure you have seen those pictures. This was on the front page of Bangkok Post, if I'm not wrong. As a guest arriving in Bangkok, you see this kind of welcome. It's quite scary. So there's a lot of details that we need to readjust. To spend one night in one hotel in Bangkok, usually you get the result within 8 hours or 10 hours. I would say that this is not the end of the world. This is not the end of the world, knowing that those people will stay at least 10 days or 2 weeks in Thailand.
It's not the end of the world if you had to face 14. But if you consider, it's like, you remember travel before 9/11. You step on the plane 20 minutes before your flight, right? Yeah. And still, my water bottle's taken away, my lighter's still taken away. 21 years later, you would think governments would reassess the real risk. There has not been another attempted plane anywhere in North America or Europe, right? So at some level for this one, I don't know how long it's going to impact our industry, but clearly you would want the least amount of impacts to travel. You know, if you go online, Twitter today, and there's a lot of blogs about the two-hour waits. Thailand has always been not as good, let's say, on immigration than, say, Singapore, where I used to travel twice or 3 times a month. And today, it's not just the immigration. You have to have all your forms rechecked. It's on social media now.
Even if it's on the Thailand Pass, and even
COE. No, you've done it. You uploaded it all.
The COE's gone. But so anyway, thank you. Can we take the next question?
Philip Cornwell-Smith, I'm a freelance writer. Actually, he's taken quite a bit of my question. I did actually come back to Thailand since the opening started on the 2nd, and my question was really that there's a lack of trust in the bureaucratic mindset of Thailand. And I've been traveling not just to UK, but I traveled into the EU, to the strictest country in the world as far as vaccine passes go, which is Italy. And there's a trust in the document. You've just simply got a QR code on your phone, and it's all straightforward. In Thailand, they demand every single document again in paper that is already been approved in the COE, and I don't know whether it's going to be the same with the Thailand Pass, whether you still will have to show the paper to administrators on the way here.
The Thailand Pass, I mean, I'm looking at the screen and I see that we've lost Kun Isara, who did tell me that he was going to have to leave earlier. But just to answer that, it is something, it is a work in progress. It was, I think, in the first couple of days, they were working out some of the kinks in the system. In theory, and we'll see if it actually works, the Thailand Pass is supposed to eliminate the need to pull out the papers again. The same way that domestic travel or international travel to Phuket, there is. I mean, there's Go Phuket, the webpage, and technically you enter all of your details. It's checked, and once it's checked online, you get a QR code, and all you have to do at the airport is wave your QR code and walk through, and it works. And it took a little while, but it actually so. Hopefully that will happen as well. Just to tie into that as well, I've been looking online. There are some questions that are similar in nature about insurance requirements, about people who have recovered from COVID and who are not vaccinated. What's their status? So there are sort of technical questions that I'm sure are also kinks that will be worked out as these things come up and they come to people, come to the attention of the authorities, and it'll work better. And this is also, this is another lesson from Phuket Sandbox. These systems do work. They did, and almost invariably they didn't at the beginning, or they had lots of bugs and lots of issues. And by after a couple of weeks, they figured them out. So we don't have anybody here to address that specifically who's actually responsible for that, but one can hope.
Yeah, I mean, it's broadly, most of the presentation has been about Thailand and its businesses and its economy, and it's very much of the attitude, if we open, people will come. But as Aaron was saying, I think that from the outside world, it's still much, much more of a challenge to come to Thailand than it is to go to somewhere else
since we have
with these kind of rules.
Since we have Kun Ek still sitting here, who gave us a very optimistic forecast, what do you say to people? What happens if, right now the international flights out of China are 2% of what they were? The airlift out of China is 2% of what it was in 2019. What happens if if the Chinese tourists can't, not that they don't want to, but what if they can't come back? What do you say to people whose projections are less optimistic than yours?
Oh, thank you, Khun Vincent. Well, if China decide to not open our border ever again, well, I think that we still
Hopefully
have
not ever again, but
we can still have 70% of the market share that is not occupied by Chinese. I think that 70% is enough for hotels to return to profit from what I think in the inter-occupancy rate. But I think in that sense, I believe China try to reopen. If you see the news comment by Kun Gao Fu, head of China CDC, and Chong Nan-chan, the health expert as a health advisor to the CCP as well. They mentioned three things. First, 85% vaccination by Chinese. Second, a booster shot of mRNA that is made in China. Well, for you may heard Fosun JV with BioNTech that's been waiting for the approval, but it has been in limbo since July, and it's 3 months, 4 months, doesn't even go through the approval. But if you see the news last month, Sinopharm is making their own mRNA vaccine. I think that may somehow give a clue that hey, maybe they want to wait for their government-owned vaccine to be used for their own people. And lastly, China did try to reopen. They did with Macau, and next month they will try to reopen, lower the condition with Hong Kong. So I think that China will try to reopen, and well, if not next year, then it could be 2023. But in terms of timeline, I think people try to coin. Your guess is as best as mine, but we got 4 timelines as people have been saying. First one would be Winter Olympic in February. Second would be mRNA vaccinated by Chinese in mid-June, and Hangzhou Asian Game in September next year, and last will be CCP party election in late October 2022. That will be some kind of key dates to hope for China reopening.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. We have another question in the room.
Hi, I'm Lekha Shankar. I write for a newspaper in India. So my question was India related, because after China, everybody has a lot of hope in the Indian market. You mentioned yourself that it's really uplifted the industry in the Maldives. My question was basically to the TAT gentleman, because there's so much of confusion about the Thailand pass. And in the talk of the second, they didn't mention the insurance. He spoke of the other documents.
Insurance is another question that came up online.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of confusion. I mean, the insurance that a tourist buys and the insurance, like say an expat buys, what's the difference? Like it's for treatment in Thailand. So what is the validity? What is the time? That was one question. The second was, I think Thailand pass, they should give a time limit when it will be approved, because sometimes you may just go on a trip like we plan to go for a week, and we need to get the document before we leave. Does the Thailand pass go to the Thai embassies in the foreign countries? Are
Yes.
they the ones who approve it?
I think so, yeah.
Like the COE, like the COE.
It's basically
yeah.
an online COE.
Yeah. So basically, we need a time. You know, some people say Richard Barrow said he got it very fast, but he's Richard Barrow. But will we get it within 2 or 3 days? And the last point that you made about travel, like for instance, the Indian market, it's open, but there are no flights.
Yeah.
So the
This is
main
a problem.
point is to start this travel bubble, which is what they're working on. So the market can only come when there are enough flights, you know.
Does anybody have any insight on the return of flights? I mean, there was a report last week. We talked about, Kunek and I talked about this the other day, about how airports have, how international slots at Don Mueang have all been returned to the airport. Does anybody have any, which is a disputable
I would
figure?
just say that on Agoda, we sell flights, and I'm surprised that the level of sales is getting close to the 2019 level. Again, I know capacity is still down, but the resurgence of flight demand is frankly even a bit of a surprise to me.
Right, I can add on to that. Well, on the front that Don Mueang slot got returned, it's basically operating efficiency point by AOT. They just try to shuffle all the slot to Suvarnabhumi to when the utilization reach certain point, they will reopen again the Don Mueang if the number of flight reach certain criteria. And on the flight, I think I saw the news about Make My Trip joining with Indigo, short haul airline by India. Well, trying to make a direct flight to Phuket in the near next month. I think that should maybe they saw the demand from that side.
Excellent. So it's part of, that's part of an answer to your question, hopefully, Indigo to Phuket. Next question, please. Could you speak a little bit closer to the... Or maybe turn it on.
Hi, my name is Peter Harper. I'm an architect from Harper Architecture. And just the discussion about the Maldives. I've designed resorts in the Maldives for many years, and they're truly international. You walk into their resorts, like Kuramati, there's 15 different nationalities. In the latest travel conference in London, they have foreigners fronting the Maldives. Given that 20% of the GDP of Thailand is directed from foreign customers, I would have thought that maybe this is a great opportunity for Thailand to understand that we are the friends of Thailand, and that perhaps the government, I notice they have Richard Barrow now as an English school teacher in London pitching, that perhaps the Thai government could embrace have some foreigners talking about the government and regulations. I mean, normally in marketing, I think it would serve Thailand a lot better, and it would help Thailand to have some foreigners in the Thailand Tourist Authority, and also see foreigners as the real friends in tourism, and as a shift to see that we can really help the country. So I say that in a caring way as a long-time resident of Thailand. But I think it's a really, really important thing that we're in an international market, and I can see the struggle of the Thai government, of course with language, but you could see the changing regulations, the Facebook pages, the changing regulations all the time. Now, if you had someone thinking about the marketing of that, you would have a very clear set of regulations. You would then pitch that in 5 different language, different markets.
Can I just say, I mean, again, unfortunately, Kunisara has already left the group.
Yeah.
And I can assure you that I'm not an ambassador for TAT, and I'm not a spokesperson for TAT. But if they've been doing anything in the last year and a half, that's exactly what they've been doing. They've been keeping brand Thailand alive around the world through social media, through people speaking on their behalf around the world on doing events. The one example that kind of amused me, because I lived in Rome for a little while, they turned the beach in Cinecittà, the amusement park, the theme park, into Phuket Beach. And amazing Thailand Phuket Beach in the middle of Rome. And so they've done a lot of things that maybe we don't see within Thailand. But it is something that they're incredibly conscious of, how well that works and how well, how, if that brings people back immediately or not, or in the shorter, medium term, remains to be seen.
I suppose
Did you have a question that you wanted to?
For Thailand is to embrace real internationalism, just as Singapore has, by having more international people as part of the government and part of the
part of the
country.
decision-making.
Yeah,
process.
because that's your customer base is 20% foreigners. So, I even actually saw in that London a news conference. Speaking English is challenging for Thais. I know I've been here 30 years. But even the person who pitched was from TOT and was challenged by English. Now, they really needed...
Is there... I mean,
Yeah.
other than stating what you saw, which we've all experienced, did you want to ask a question?
No, I'm just making the point. I think it's
Thank
a
you,
really,
thank you,
really
thank you very
important point for Thailand. I'm saying it in a positive sense, so that you can bring back not just
Excellent.
20% of the GDP, but create more and more people come to this fantastic country
I mean,
and enjoy it.
Kun Kwat, who's I think possibly also left us, was saying that his scenario was, average spending going up from 50 to 80,000 baht per person. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Is there anything you would like to add before we wrap this up? Would anybody like to make a statement about what you see coming? Are there coming trends?
Maybe to finish on a positive note, maybe I can just to let you know that Accor has never signed so many new hotels in the region with 4,000 rooms for 12 countries. So it means that owners, investors are very keen to proceed with such investments after such a dramatic experience with the COVID. So it's a very positive sign to see that. So it's very encouraging. Right.
And says a lot about your outlook. John, would you like to?
Yeah, I would just say in closing that, first of all, a big thank you to all of our hotel partners, to the people in the government that we do work with, to all of our customers. It has been a hard time. You can hear from some of the questions that there is some frustration out there that things aren't perfect. And I would simply say that if there's one thing that COVID taught me, it's how little sometimes we know about what's really going on, especially when something new happens. So, in the early days of COVID, where does it come from? Can you get it by shaking hands? Is it only transmitted via respiratory interactions? Do the vaccines work? Do masks work? Like, there were so many questions, and everybody got polarized and got into different camps. But the truth was, nobody really knew exactly how this was going to play out. So everybody was being cautious because people were dying. So I would simply say that the world does feel at last to be coming back to normal. It's been a chaotic year and a half. People have tried as hard as they possibly could against all of these adverse circumstances. So I would simply say again, thanks to everybody who helped to get us back where we are. And I say us, not even just Thailand. Agoda works all over the world. That we will come through this crisis, and I think we'll come through it better. It hasn't been easy, but we'll get there. So I will end with that same note of optimism. Thank you.
Okay. And on that note, I will remind everybody that Kun also had a very optimistic outlook, and I will thank you all for your time. Thank you for staying through a panel that ran a bit longer than we expected. But it was because there was a lot of interest and a lot of questions and a lot of points to be raised, many more than we had time to answer and address. Thank you very much. Please come back to the FCCT online and in person on the 10th for the COP26 panel, on the 16th for the Travel and Tourism in Southeast Asia panel, hosted by yours truly. And with that, thank you very much, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Khap kun kap.